Welcome into another episode of Christ in a Culture War. This is your host, Jesse Williams, and we are shooting another podcast today. It is Thursday, September the 18th. I had to look at my computer because I had no idea what day it was. I knew it was Thursday, but I didn't know the day of the week. So we did a podcast, I think it dropped last week. Thank you for all 6 people who watched on YouTube, but got a lot of interactions on Facebook and on TikTok. So I'm going to keep doing these videos. The viewership fluctuates between videos, and I'm not going to lie, it can become a source of pride when you do a 30 to 40 minute video and you're tempted to look at the views. But as my friend Dustin Cooper would say, man, if you love it, you do it, and the views will come or they won't come, and you can't worry about that. Just so you know, this shirt right here, I have never worn it before. I've tried it on, but I have actually never worn this shirt in public. I own a lot of shirts, and so congratulations, you're the first to get to see this shirt. Thought it went well with the hat. Another ironic thing is that I am wearing a Detroit Tigers hat, and I am a Cleveland Guardians fan, and we are playing them today as we did the last 2 days. So hopefully this won't jinx the team, but we're struggling to find a playoff spot, and the team hasn't really been that good. But hey, when you're a fan, you're a fan. Also, to all of my die-hard Arkansas Razorbacks fans, I am representing for you today after that horrible loss that we had last week. Woo pig. So I will be drinking water throughout the podcast. And so, yes, we will go ahead and get into what we are talking about today. And the last video I did was directed at the church. And the title of it was Church Be the Church. And I could have put a clickbaity title in there to get more people to watch, because obviously last Wednesday, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I did misspeak in the video. I said Jesus was assassinated. I commented on it immediately and said, of course, I meant to say that on Facebook when I posted it, that he was crucified. Now people are referring to Charlie Kirk as a martyr, which I've seen really good defenses for. Frank Turek, who we're going to get to, which is going to be what I want to address in this podcast. And I'll explain to the people who don't know who Frank Turek is. I've talked about him on the podcast. I watched his entire video on Charlie Kirk. He was a personal friend of Charlie Kirk's for the last 5 years. And Mike Winger, who you've also heard me talk about, Mike Winger, who did not know Charlie Kirk, but went through some of the stuff that, what he learned about Charlie Kirk and Charlie Kirk's faith, right? So I didn't want to talk a lot about this topic, not because I'm afraid, because if you know me, I'm going to speak my mind. I mean, like I said, the YouTube channel is getting anywhere between 6 and 39 views. So I'm not getting paid from YouTube. I'm not getting paid from Facebook. I'm not getting paid from TikTok. This is not my normal job, but it's something that I love to do, right? I love to talk to you guys via the audio, the camera, or whatever. I've got some different lighting going on. You see the hats and the pictures on the wall. Like, I do this from my apartment, right? And so I've never been a person that has been afraid to say what I think, but when I was younger, my dad used to always tell me to think before I speak. I would go up to my dad, I'd start stuttering, he'd be like, hey, come back when you formulated your thought. It wasn't a rude thing. I didn't have a stuttering problem. I had a speaking before I knew what I wanted to say problem. And that followed me into my early adulthood. And then I got throat checked by a Korean guy in basic training. And as I walked to the back of the chow line, I realized that the words have power, right? There is power in the tongue. I actually had the privilege of teaching Sunday school. I was filling in for my friend John Jack, and he's a great Sunday school teacher, man. And he he was going to share. So John works at a camp here called Bog Springs, and John, I think he's like the superintendent, but he went to this church to tell him what Bog Springs was doing, and then he preached that Sunday. So I filled in Sunday school. We talked about Joseph, and in there I talked about the power of the tongue. My example was Joseph had these dreams, but Joseph then went and told his brothers who already didn't like him about these dreams, and then his parents he also told the dreams to, maybe just his father, whatever. We're getting into semantics. And so my biggest thing in life is I like to try to carefully consider things. So if I'm talking to somebody about the gospel, I use Tactics, which is a book by Greg Kokel, who's a Christian apologist, and I like to ask questions. So I was talking with someone in the break room. They said they were agnostic. We kind of fleshed it out a little bit, and I just asked him questions. I was like, okay, well, because I know what I believe, right? And it used to be I just want to tell people what I believe, tell people this, tell people that. But sometimes you just have to start the conversation, right? That's apologetics to me. And this is from the great Christian apologists that exist today. Sorry, I'm rubbing my nose. You can't see that on the Spotify version, obviously, because it's just audio. But the way to engage the culture is to ask questions, have people defend their positions. And I think we had a good conversation. Shout out to my buddy Jose. And so I was going somewhere with that. Yeah, so when I do this podcast, I am not afraid to say what I believe, right? But I like to carefully consider of how I say it, right? Because I could get on here and I can rage and yell into the microphone and make this into a spectacle, right? And people be like, oh my gosh, Jay Will went off. People call me Jay Will, right? And that's not the point. Because this podcast is to plant seeds. We're going to speak truth here. We're going to speak about things that aren't popular. And so I didn't want to, because in the culture today, it's quick reactions, right? Something happens and what's your immediate opinion of it, right? Sports is a great example of that. Something happens, right? Week 1 of the NFL season, and everyone, and that's why they call it Overreaction Monday. They have a section on ESPN, or they did, and we call it Monday morning quarterbacking, right? So you watch a game and then you immediately have takeaways. Like, so there are some sports podcasts that do this. Like, as soon as the Sunday night game, as soon as the NFL game is over, they jump on the podcast and they give immediate reactions. That's cool because we're in such a information now society, but sometimes it's why when sports happens, right? And they interview someone right after the game, where it might be more beneficial to the player to sit with what happened, collect his thoughts or her thoughts, and then give an interview when the emotions aren't so raw. And so I've been sitting with this Charlie Kirk situation, and I've heard the discourse at work, at church, just out in public, online, and I didn't want to just be another voice, because I truly believe that people already had a preconceived notion of what I was going to say because of people who know me, my views, right? I am a conservative, if you want to call it that, right? Like, I don't define myself by my political leanings. I define myself first as a Christian, as a father, as a son, and then we can get into the politics. But so let me explain why I'm doing this video. So right after Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead, all these videos started surfacing online about the guy in the white shirt and the white hat standing behind Charlie Kirk or beside him. I think he said he was off his right elbow in the video that I watched. And then they were talking about the security guy, right? And so people were already like, oh, he touched his hat, he touched his nose, he's giving signals to the shooter, right? But the thing is, the people didn't even know who the guy in the hat was. I'm not talking so much about the security guy. I don't really know who that guy is, but they're like, isn't that the same guy that was at Trump's deal? And so the immediate conclusion was there's a conspiracy here. Listen, I was in the military for 20 years, and I've shot rifles a lot. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, because people in the Army will tell you I'm not. But I know how to shoot a rifle. I know how far I can shoot undeterred. And so if I have a clear line of sight at a target, right? So if I'm on a rifle range and I'm sitting there and the target pops up and I have a direct sight, I don't need anyone to tell me that that target popped up or that that target is there. Now in the military it's different because they pop up some at a time, and so that is beneficial. But if, let's say I was at a range and the targets just were all up, right? And I'm just engaging the targets and they're up. They're not going up and down, they're just up. So at 200 yards or 150 yards or meters, however you want to say it, because they're basically the same, then I can sit there, put I had an ACOG at the end of my career. It's like a little red chevron, and then you put it on top of this thing, and it magnifies the target. If I have that and I put it on that target, and my trigger squeeze and my breathing and my position are all good, then when I pull that trigger, I'm going to hit that target. Charlie Kirk was sitting in a chair at an outdoor event, right? The shooter was on top of a building, right? And so he doesn't need signals, first off. He just sits there. Charlie Kirk's pretty much sitting still. I mean, you're going to move a little bit when you talk, but the target's here. So he's going to put whatever he was using, whether it was an iron sight or a scope or whatever, he's going to put that target where he wants to hit, and then he's going to pull the trigger. Okay, so who's the guy in the white hat? The guy in the white hat is a man named Frank Turek. So Frank Turek is a Christian apologist. And excuse me, I apologize, Dr. Frank Turek, right? So he has been traveling the country for years, doing a presentation on a book that he wrote with a guy who's now since passed, Norman Geisler. And they wrote a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And so they do these presentations on college campuses, and then they open it up for Q&A. Just like Charlie Kirk did with the political stuff, but Charlie also did it with Christianity. So Frank Turek has been traveling the country doing this. Charlie Kirk and Frank Turek, this is coming from Frank because I watched his video last night. His YouTube page is Cross-Examined. That's examined with an X, right? Cross-Examined, or you go to their website, crossexamined.org. They actually also have a Cross-Examined app. And so Frank Turek spent 8 years in the Navy, and then now he's an author and he's a speaker, right? And so he does Christian apologetics. He engages with students, but he does his stuff mainly indoors, whereas Charlie does his outdoors. They got connected. They became friends to the point to where on this video, Frank Turek is reading texts from Charlie Kirk to him. He talked about walks they went on. He talked about Charlie asking Frank to critique his performances. And so they had actually been together, and I don't want to misspeak, for the last 2-3 days before this event happened. So their wives know each other. They know each other. They're actual like friends. And Charlie Kirk looked at Frank Turek as a mentor. So this isn't just a video to defend Frank Turek. But when I started seeing this, and then I realized who that was, and I'm like, you mean the guy that jumped in the car and was trying to do CPR on Charlie Kirk? That's the guy that's the guy that was signaling to the shooter, who once again, like Mike Winger said, I'm not going to use his name. Y'all know the name, y'all can look it up, but I'm not going to give that guy any more fame, right? And so the thing is that people are so quick to want to have the inside scoop. And this is where I'm going to get into conspiracy theories, right? Now, I want to be very clear. There are a lot of things that people will say are conspiracy theories that actually have some validity behind them, right? I think 9/11, there's still a lot of questions behind 9/11. The JFK assassination, right? If you haven't heard of it, there was a declassified document that was called Operation Northwoods. And long story short, some people, I think it was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or it was somebody in the government, went to President John F. Kennedy in the 60s, and they had this plan where they were going to dress up Cuban, it was something to do with, they were going to dress up Cubans as Castro supporters, and then they were going to basically they were going to attack Guantanamo Bay. And then so they were going to use this attack to basically say, Castro's bad, we need to overthrow him. And Kennedy was like, no, we're not going to do that. It's what you call a false flag attack. It did not happen. It was not approved. But these documents have been declassified. So that is not a conspiracy, right? We have witnesses for the resurrection of Jesus. It is not a conspiracy. There's this funny video on TikTok that's going around where these guys reenact if the 12 disciples had decided to make up the resurrection after Jesus had died, right? And it's a funny video, but it's like it gives insight to like, look, this is what they like. So the guy's like, hey, we're gonna tell people that he rose again, and they're like, how are we gonna do that? And they're like, well, we're gonna steal the body, and they're like, yeah. And then some guy's like, what are we gonna get out of this? And he's like, we're gonna get brutally murdered. And so, right, so conspiracy theories, right? So I'm old enough to remember 9/11. So I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. September 11th, 2001. I got on the bus. Some girl, well, she was a foreign exchange student, I want to say from Russia. And she was like, "Hey, they just hit the World Trade Center." I didn't know what the World Trade Center was. I knew what the Pentagon was, the White House, the Capitol, but I was 17, didn't know what the World Trade Center was. I get to school, the videos are this plane flying into the building, the second plane in the Pentagon, and we sat there and watched all day. And then they're like, "Oh, this is Islamic terrorism," right? So now there's theories about, okay, so what did the government know ahead of time? How was this? How did three planes all um, detect, like, go beyond the radar detecting and all that? Like, did a plane actually hit the Pentagon, or was it a missile, right? Um, and so the problem is that my dad said this one time. We were talking about 9/11, and I was all about, like, the 9/11 truthers, 9/11 conspiracies. There was a documentary, I think it was called Loose Change, and I was watching all the documentaries, right? And this is after I got back from Iraq, so this would have been 2009 through like 2012 time period, right? When all this stuff's coming out about 9/11 and is 9/11 an inside job and all this, right? And so then the JFK files, the Martin Luther King assassination. And so I think what happens is people just automatically assume that when something happens that it had to be a broad conspiracy. Now, I think it was Mike Winger who made a good point on his video that I watched last night, where there's a lot of celebration on the far left that makes it seem like this wasn't an isolated incident. But I just think it's irresponsible to be like, that guy in the white hat was signaling the shooter, and you don't even know who that person is. In the PBD podcast, Patrick Bet David, I didn't watch the video, but maybe the title was clickbaity. But I know they did a video about it. And if y'all were talking about that shooter, and y'all claim to be, and y'all say y'all are Christians. I'm not going to say claim, because it insinuates that I don't believe that you are. I do. A couple of guys on the podcast claim to, or profess to be Christians. There we go. A better way to say it. They profess to be Christians. And if you're indulging in this without knowing the facts, and then come to find out that the guy in the white hat, the white hat was actually one of the hats that Charlie Kirk was throwing out. There's literally video of Frank Turek throwing the hats into the crowd. Like, this is not the first time that Charlie and Frank have done events together, right? And so, and Frank Turek barely even acknowledged it, which he shouldn't have, like, because it's ridiculous. Because the man has, at that point when all this was coming out, the man had been dead less than a couple of days, and we're already jumping to conspiracy theories. Oh, was it Israel? Was it this? Someone died, right? And now the discourse is people get killed for their words, and the people that it's becoming like, the tension in the country is so high because people are now taking clips of Charlie Kirk and posting them all over line on both sides. People who love Charlie, people who didn't care about Charlie. And the funny thing was, a lot of the people that I know that are talking about Charlie Kirk after he died, I never heard them mention Charlie Kirk one time in my life. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he was a racist, he was against the civil rights bill, which is a clip that was taken out of context. Oh, gun violence. There's even a guy that I went to college with who is like, I'm not saying Charlie Kirk should have died, but you live by the proverbial gun, you die by the proverbial gun. What? So that's so Second Amendment, right? Like the right to bear arms, which the founding fathers literally put in the Constitution because to defend against a tyrannical government, right? And so the Second Amendment talk has gotten so crazy, and it's like, well, because he supported the Second Amendment, and he said that with the Second Amendment, there are going to be gun deaths, right? And so you live by the proverbial gun, you die by the proverbial gun. That is insane. That is insane. So if I believe in the Second Amendment and someone breaks into my house and shoots me, I lived by the proverbial gun? That's ridiculous. That is an insane, like, proposition, right? That's like saying that because I think people have the right to consume alcohol, that if I get seriously hurt or injured in a drunk driving accident, that I live by the proverbial bottle. Because with freedom comes people who are going to use that freedom to do bad and wrong things. Evil exists. And it's funny because a lot of the people that talk about this don't even believe in evil, right? So I talked to the church last week, right? And so I've said what I needed to say about that. And what that is like, church, we need to be the church. Like this whole, I'm not going to talk to anybody on the left anymore. Like Charlie Kirk would have forgiven his killer, I believe. Jesus on the cross is saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know, that they know not what they do. Stephen, when he was getting stoned, and I'm stealing this from either Mike Winger or Frank Turek because they both said it, and I'm not afraid to steal it because I'm giving credit. So I follow a lot of those guys' content. I didn't find out who Frank Turek was after Charlie Kirk got shot. I have been watching Frank Turek on YouTube for a long time. And listen, I disagree with Frank Turek on some stuff, but he's absolutely a Christian. He's absolutely a believer. He's absolutely out here preaching the gospel. He is traveling the country, spreading the news of Jesus in a podcast format. And so Mike Winger, same thing. Like I've been following Mike Winger for years. I have shouted them out on this podcast, right? I have done whole podcasts of people that I recommend that you watch their content, people who have way more followers than me, people who do this for a living, right? And so it just really upset me that it's like we're so quick to jump to conspiracy theories that we don't even take the time to find the facts out first. And then after you find out that the guy in the white hat and the white polo is actually dear friends with Charlie Kirk and who is going through a really hard time now because that was literally his friend, someone he viewed as a son. And then we're just like, oops, our bad. My bad. Oh, well, move on to the next thing. Oh, look. And it's like, I get it. Like, why we search for truth in these type of things, but are we searching for truth in the things that really matter, right? Because, so I have done 3 videos. This is the 3rd video I've done. And so the first video I did a while back was, are all religions the same? And then the Charlie Kirk thing happened, and I spoke to the church about how we need to be the church, how we need to love people, how we need to set the example, how we don't need to place our politics above our faith in Jesus. Now, the reason that I would call myself a conservative politically is because, like Frank said, politics gives us the means to share our faith, right? Like, we live in a country, thank God, that still has the First Amendment, right? And that gives us the right to preach the gospel and to have opinions and to write articles, opinion pieces, and to have points of view that are opposite to what other people believe. Just like there's an issue, just like with the Second Amendment, there's, and listen, I'm not even like super Second Amendment. Listen, I understand. I am going to probably, if people actually watch this video, if you're a conservative and super gun rights, I'm probably going to piss you off. If you're a far leftist, I'm definitely going to piss you off. If you are not a believer, I'm going to piss you off, right? And I don't even know if piss you off is the right language to use, so I apologize. I'm going to upset you, right? Because I try not to live in an echo chamber. Now, is it true that like after a certain time, like I don't listen to opposing views as much? Well, if I already, like if it's someone that I already like know their position, I'm like, all right, cool, I've already listened to that opinion, I already disagree with it. Now with people, it's different. Like in person, like we can disagree, we can, like, dude, I used to do sports radio, like on the internet, and then me and my buddy did a podcast, and on that we were debating each other. My good friend Ian, like, and we disagreed on stuff, and my friend David, and the 3 of us would disagree on stuff, or we would have discussions, sometimes heated discussions. But we never stopped being friends just because we disagreed on a podcast. I mean, because I respect them, so I respect their opinion. So more than ever, just like the Second Amendment comes with violations, so does the First Amendment, right? So if we think that Charlie Kirk or anyone else had the right to engage with students on campus and have disagreements and put forth conservative Christian views, right? Then we have to be okay with someone that speaks about liberal points of view or atheist points of view, agnostic points of view, or different religious views that I disagree with, right? I think they have the right to say that. Absolutely. And then people have the right, as disgusting as I find it, to celebrate people dying. And I think it's terrible. I'm not saying that people should do that, but I'm saying there's not a law against that in this country. And I don't know where I stand on people getting fired for that stuff. But if you work for a company and you represent a company, then people have been fired for saying all kinds of things that are not congruent to the company standards or whatever, right? So if I work for the news, they just suspended Jimmy Kimmel's program, right? I don't remember the exact comment, but it was something about the MAGA people are scrambling to try to say that this is a guy that wasn't MAGA, right? Make America Great Again movement, the shooter, right? And it's like, really, bro? Okay, Jimmy Kimmel. See, now I actually am upset because I happen to remember there was a school shooting and Jimmy Kimmel getting on TV and crying his eyes out and like, this is senseless and this is why we need to get rid of the guns. But when Charlie Kirk dies, where's the tears? It's still gun violence, right, Jimmy Kimmel? It's still gun violence, right? Let's be consistent. Let's be consistent, right? Like, school shootings are terrible. I have a son. He goes to school. Like, I have to worry about things like that. And whether or not we agree or disagree on, like, what guns people should be able to own or if we should own them at all, that's a different thing. Listen, we are going to live in a world, in eternity, where there will be no guns. So hunters and all these people, that sounds so bad. I don't mean it that way when I say all these people. But I'm saying, listen, if you are a diehard Second Amendment advocate, right? Cool. But just know that when we get, so heaven's going to be here, right? And eternity's going to be here once Jesus comes back. There ain't going to be no guns. There ain't going to be any war. There ain't going to be no deer hunting. You ain't going to have a 30-06 or an M16 or an AR-15 or a Glock or a Beretta, a 9mm, a 45, a 50 cal machine gun. Like, none of that's going to exist. I wish we lived in a world, like when we talk about should countries own nuclear weapons, I wish we lived in a world where none of that existed, right? But we live in a world where countries go to war. We live in a world where evil does exist because God gave us free will. And so Jimmy Kimmel, and that's why, like, it's hypocrisy, bro. Like, where were your tears for that guy getting shot, right? But if that had been someone on the left, right? Now, I'm not saying people on the right, listen, nobody should get shot for their ideas. And I'm just rambling because some of this stuff just really upsets me. But then I have to take a step back and I have to pray for Jimmy Kimmel, right? And like I said, it's terrible, right? Like, Martin Luther King Jr.'s politics, I would probably disagree with. Not like the civil rights stuff, but like, I think it's sad that he got assassinated. Like Malcolm X. Malcolm X was really not for white people at all. And I don't think he should have been assassinated, but he got assassinated by the Nation of Islam, right? Because he started to switch up. He started to be like, oh, well, maybe we do need to work with people we disagree with. And they killed him. Like, so as Christians, what does that mean? As Christians, we have to be the beacon of light. I said this last week. We have to be the beacon of light. So we have to call out things. So I am calling out the conspiracy theory that the guy in the white hat, who I know is Frank Turek, had anything to do with the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, because of free speech, you have the right to propagate those theories. But if you were online propagating this, right, and if you have a platform and you were propagating this and you were saying these things, and I think that once it's figured out that you were wrong, then as the kids say, keep that same energy, right? So if I'm wrong, like, I address things and I keep that same energy, right? And so it's just, this is why the conspiracy stuff, and I'm going to say conspiracy theory in quotation. So if you ever listen to this on Spotify, you're not going to see the quotations because it's only audio. But if you're watching this on YouTube or when I post it to Facebook or whatever, you'll see the air quotes, right? And so I just think that, because here's how a conspiracy works, right? So let's go with the conspiracy that people changed the Bible, right? Let's use that one. And then let's go through how many levels of conspiracy it would have taken for that to be true, right? So first, you would have had to find all the copies of the manuscripts written in. We'll just use the New Testament, right? So the New Testament was written in Greek and a little bit of Aramaic, but maybe the little bit of Aramaic might actually be in the Old Testament. So let's just say Greek. So you have to go find all the Greek manuscripts. They started copying the Gospels and the letters pretty soon after they were written, in the 2nd century. So let's go with they changed this in the Council of Nicaea, right? So at that point, I think it was written in Greek, Coptic, and Syriac, right? But let's just go with the Greek. So you would have had to go find all the Greek manuscripts, right? These overzealous monks. And Vodi Bakum, who is a pastor and a president of a university in Africa, author also. You've heard me talk about Vodi. Vodi goes through this much better than me. But you would have had to get all those manuscripts. You would have had to make the changes, not show your handwriting, and then put them back, right? Well, then you would have had to find all of the Syriac and Coptic copies after that, right? So then people started translating it in different languages, right? And so you'd have had to go find all those manuscripts and change them, right? And then also the early church fathers wrote commentaries, so much so that some people, I don't know how accurate this is, but it's pretty accurate, that if you just had the writings of the church fathers, that you could reconstruct about 90% of the New Testament. Some people say 99, some people say 90. We'll just say 70. Let's just go with 90, right? So you would have to go find all their writings, and then you would have to go change those copies, put them back, right? Because if there's this at the Council of Nicaea, all right, and then people were like, oh, the King James Bible, that's when they changed it. And it's like, well, that's even further down. So now you're in the 1600s, and you got to go all the way back to the 200s, or I'm sorry, to the 100s, and you got to change all these copies and then not tell anybody and not show your pen work, this and that. So, and then you would have had to like find all these manuscripts. And what about the manuscripts that hadn't been found, right? So, because if they would have done that, and then we would have found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you know, the overzealous monks could have found those before anybody else and changed all those, right? So that's just a conspiracy to where it's like, and then nobody tells anybody, right? So that's what happens in a conspiracy. Is like me and you have to conspire to do something, but then the more people that you get involved, the less likely the conspiracy is. This is what my dad was explaining to me about 9/11. Like, if the government was involved, how many people would have had to have known? How many people would have never talked? How many people would never go on a podcast later on and let it slip up? Like, all this inside secret stuff. And my dad was like, the government doesn't seem to be very good at their basic job. You think that they're going to pull this off? So my prayer and my question would be to stop with the conspiracy theory stuff unless you have some evidence, right? Because I tell people I was a history major in college. I did not graduate from college, whatever. But I like to view myself as someone very interested in history. I'm not going to call myself a historian because I'm not. But so in history, like, we go based on the evidence, right? So the life of Abraham Lincoln, we want to get as close to the source as possible. Who wrote the stuff, right? That's why we don't accept the pseudepigrapha, right? The missing gospels that we all have, right? Like, if they're missing, why can I read them, right? The banned books of the Bible, like, they're not banned. I literally own digital copies of these books. The Gospel of Peter, Thomas, Mary Magdalene, Judas, the Infancy Gospel. Like, I own these. The Gospel of Barnabas. Like, I own these. I paid for them on Kindle. I can read them. Like, they're not banned. Like, I would be curious if you ever actually watch this video or in the comics, like, what are actual banned books? Like, I've never had the police knock on my door. Hey, you got this book in your house. You're under arrest. No. I have lots of books in my house. I have lots in my apartment, right? I have lots of books. I got Star Wars books. I got Christian books. I got John Grisham books. I got Christian fiction books. I got theology books. I got history books. I have autobiographies. I have biographies. I have Bibles. I have a Quran somewhere that I don't know where it is, but I have an End Time Study Bible. I have all kinds of books. No one's ever knocked on my door and been like, you got any of them banned books in there? No. So this video's been all over the place. and about to end it. But, and this will be the last video that I release about the Charlie Kirk situation, unless it just comes up off the top of my head, because I'm not going to make this a sensational channel. I'm not going to title things for views. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just speak from the heart. And from the heart, I was very disappointed with the conspiracy stuff. I don't like hypocrisy, and I'm not saying I've never been hypocritical. I like to say things as it is. So if you're upset that I supported a lot of what Charlie Kirk stood for, cool. You can either talk to me about it, or you can unfollow me or unfriend me if you so feel like. I'm not saying you should, but that's your prerogative. That's your right. I'm going to keep it moving. And hopefully if it's someone's close to me, you would just talk to me, right? You'd be like, hey, let's discuss this. And like, I'm not like a Charlie Kirk apologist. Like, I watched a lot of his content. I agreed with a lot of what he said. I think that if you don't actually look into what he said and you pick and cherry pick and take things out of context, I think that you can find problems with that, especially if you're on the left. But I just know that I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus is the only way to salvation. If that offends you, we can talk about it, or you can unfriend me, unfollow me, whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't have to watch my videos. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you know what? I want to keep those followers, so I'm going to tone it down and be like, Jesus might be the only way. You know, Jesus might have resurrected. Listen, we don't have proof for anything. We have evidence, and the evidence points to that Jesus literally lived, he literally died on a cross, and he literally resurrected. Paul even says in 1 Corinthians 15 that he appeared first to Peter, then to James, the brother, I think, and then to 12, and then 500 other witnesses all at the same time, and last, someone untimely born, myself, right, on the road to Damascus. So, and he's saying some who have fallen asleep, which means they died, but most of whom are still alive. He's like, go ask them. Like, he gave you some names, and then he also said there's a whole bunch of other people. So 500 people say they saw this dude after he was crucified. They saw him again. So unless 500 people all hallucinated, or all 500 people got together and were like, we're going to make this story up, and and of these 500 people, they're probably all, or most of these people are diehard Jews who weren't expecting a crucified, resurrected Messiah. That was not their view. But Jesus claimed to be that Messiah, and then he resurrected, and they were like, oh, this is true. And it says even after, and I think it's Matthew talks about, even after Jesus resurrected, most believed, but some still doubted. Well, then Jesus ascends, and then the church explodes, and they go all over the known world, risking their lives, dying deaths, and for something that you can say they died for something they believe to be true. Cool. They died for something they didn't know was a lie. Plausible. They all knew this was a lie. They all knew that the body was dead somewhere, and they had nothing to gain from this. Like Frank Turek said, they didn't gain power, they didn't gain money, they didn't gain sex. Right? The three things that'll cause people to lie or to commit crimes over. So if you look at a crime, what's usually the motive behind the crime? If somebody robs you, they want your stuff, right? Or they want to be in control over you, or it's usually over a man or a woman, right? You see that all the time. So these, like, people just don't usually randomly go commit crimes, right? And so we got to be better with the conspiracy stuff, guys. We got to be better about just seeing something and be like, that guy touched his hat, he was signaling the shooter. And it's like, do you even know what you're talking about? Right? Like, I remember when I came home from my first deployment, people were trying to tell me what was going on in Iraq. And I'm like, you ever been there? No, man, I watched the news though. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I was there. Like I've been in situations in the military on my 3 deployments. I know what happened, right? And I'm not like a subject matter expert. I don't know what happened in the whole country, but I'm like, because they were like, you killed babies for oil. And it's like, well, that's funny because I've never killed a baby, and I didn't get any oil. So actually, I've never killed anybody. So not really sure what you're talking about there, buddy. Yeah, I know what really goes on over there. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you got it, buddy. And I kept it moving. It's like, that's his opinion. I had a guy one time, at a bar a long time ago is like, you're not in the military. So I was talking to the bartender who knew me, and I was having a beer, and I was like, we were talking about my deployment to Iraq. And he says, you're not even in the military. And I just pulled out my military ID and set it next to him, and I said, that says I am, sir. Didn't fight with him, didn't argue with him. He got up and left. Like, all right, cool. Like I have at least evidence. Now, it could have been I was out of the military. Could have been, but I also have, like, if someone were to be like, you never served in the military, it's like, really? Because I know at least, at a minimum, 100 people who can dispute that. Just military personnel. Not to mention the family members that were there when I left for a deployment, or not the other family members of the other soldiers who have met me that can verify that. Like, I just got off the texting my buddy Josh Tomboli, one of my soldiers on my last deployment. His mom, his sister, his dad can all verify that I was overseas. Why? Because they FaceTimed their son on Thanksgiving, and I jumped in on the call because he wanted me to say hi to his family. And they wanted to say thank you, take care of my son, all this. And Josh Tomboli, great soldier, buddy. I'm shouting you out in the video. Thanks for asking about my son. Believer too. Believer, believes in Jesus. We went to a Bible study in Kuwait, right? First Bible study, and we showed up, and they were covering Acts 2. And me, as a person who knows the Bible pretty well, and they gave a worksheet out. I'm like, this is going to be about speaking in tongues. And I was right. And so we sat there and had a discussion, and he was like, man, dude, I don't know if I want to go back to that Bible study. And like, man, it just wasn't for us. And so then a couple months later, he's like, we should start a Bible study. And I was like, yeah, we should. And then him and this other guy just looked at me, and I'm like, oh, you want me to do the Bible study? They're like, yes. And so I did. And of course, this is why you don't ever ask people what they want to cover in a Bible study. I'm saying this kind of jokingly, because when you do, the first thing they wanted to talk about was the book of Revelation. So guess what we covered? The book of Revelation, because I ain't no punk. I know people don't want to talk about that, but for me, it's, buddy, like, let's talk about it. It's in the Bible. It's scripture. Let's go over it. It can be confusing. They make great Bible commentaries, and man, it was a blessing. And then and the funny thing about that is we were supposed to go to Israel, and so our last Bible study before we were supposed to go to Israel, we were supposed to go to Israel on October 8th. If you know the date, you know the date of what the day before was. So we're in the Bible study, and we always did prayer requests at the end. And someone was like, sorry, Jay Will, not going to lie, we don't want to go to Israel. I was torn because I wanted to like go to Israel to say that I've been to Israel, and they were like, yeah, we're going to go do like some sightseeing. I knew the Army also has a way of like, it's not safe, we can't do that, right? But like the training was going to be like ridiculous. We weren't going to have live rounds. We were going to train with the Israelis, but it was going to be just sucky Army training, like, right? Like stuff that you're 7,000 miles at home. You just want to you just want to go to Kuwait, do your thing, and be off work and be left alone, and then get back home to your family. So we did the prayer request. I was like, God, if there's any way we could not go to Israel, the guys really don't want to go. And then that Saturday morning, October 7th, because we were literally supposed to be that. So Sunday morning at 2 a.m., we were supposed to stage our bags and head over to Israel. October 7th happens, and we don't go to Israel. So that gets canceled. So the Bible study continues, and now we have all this stuff going on in the Middle East, and we're talking about end times in Israel, and it actually kind of tied together. And listen, October 7th was a tragedy, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into Israel and Palestine and all that right now. I am sad I will say this. I am sad for everybody dying in that conflict. The Israeli hostages, the attack on October 7th. I am sad for the kids in Gaza. I am sad that there is war in the world at all, right? And I think that we live in a world where evil still exists, and so you're going to have war, you're going to have children dying, and it's tragic. And I have to keep the same energy of October 7th as if any child is killed in war. And so as a Christian, I feel like we should have empathy for all that. Like, even with like the illegal immigration thing, like if families are being separated, as a Christian, I should be sad about that. I shouldn't be like, oh, well, it's the law. Like, even if like, I believe that the government should uphold the laws of the land, it doesn't mean that I still can't have sympathy. Like, I live in a town with a lot of Hispanics, like mostly Mexicans, right? And a lot of people I work with. I love them. I love the culture, love the food. I wish I could learn Spanish better. Like, I literally go to a store down the road from me, and like everyone who works there is Mexican, right? And they're great. They treat me so well, which makes me kind of want to get my Spanish up. And I know a little bit, and I can joke a little bit in Spanish with the cashier, super nice woman, right? The people who run the laundromat, super nice, always helping me out, right? I would be sad if they got deported, right? So I think that we should love all people. Like, people that are in this country illegal, we're supposed to love them. The murderers, we're supposed to love them. I know that sounds crazy, right? But it's what Jesus did. It's what Jesus, like, Jesus literally is on the cross, like nails in his arms and his feet, suffocating after being beaten savagely. Father, forgive them. He's praying for his enemies. He's living out what he taught. So let's live out what we teach, right? This video went a little long. I don't care. I'm going to stop apologizing for that. I'm going to do videos, and I'm going to stop when I feel like stopping. I'm just trying to speak what God lays on my heart. So I hope this video blessed you. It's not Go Tigers. I just like the hat. So I hope you are blessed throughout the week. I'm dropping videos whenever I feel like dropping videos. I will post this on Facebook, on YouTube, Spotify. I will do a video on TikTok probably promoting it. We'll probably do a Facebook Live or a Facebook Reel, one of the two, Facebook video, whatever. And probably you'll find it on Instagram too. So be blessed. Y'all have a great week, and I will talk to y'all next time.